Welcome to the Auto Detailing Podcast, where we bring you the latest information in the car care industry with special interviews from the leading professionals in the industry. Now, here's your host, Jimbo Balaam.
Welcome to episode 73 of the Auto Detailing Podcast. I'm Jimbo, your host, and today on the show, we're switching it up. We're talking with Todd Helm and Chip Case from Rupes? Said many different ways, and today we're going to clear that up. So, Chip, why don't you start us off? First of all, welcome you both to the show. Thanks for joining me and taking the time out of your busy schedules. Appreciate that. Chip, why don't you first of all tell us how to say the company name correctly once and for all? Because the best piece of, or not the best piece of advice, but a piece of advice I got was just pick one way to say it and stick with that. But I want the correct way to say it. And then tell us about you and how you got involved with the company. And yeah, then we'll kick it on over to Todd.
Well, first, thanks so much for having us on, Jimbo. We appreciate the opportunity to share some of the information about our company. And the correct pronunciation of the name is actually Rupes. So you need to roll the R in the Italian style.
All right, there we go.
But as you might imagine, it's pronounced much differently in several different areas of the world. But the correct pronunciation is actually Rupes.
Rupes.
And Rupes is actually an acronym, roughly translated as Specialty Electric and Pneumatic Power Tools. The company itself is located near Milan, Italy. Been in existence since 1947. It is a family-owned entity, and there are still members of the founding family that are running the company currently. Unlike the product offering that exists here in the USA from Rupes, in Europe, there is a much larger portfolio of product that Rupes presents to the market. The company is actually structured into two particular entities. One produces power tools, the other vacuum equipment, both portable and stationary. And Rupes has long been one of the major producers of vacuum equipment in the European market. So what we see here from Rupes is basically here in North America, the Bigfoot product offering, which is tended more toward the detail and body shop industries. In Europe, Rupes also produces quite heavily for the industrial sector, although their largest market certainly is the paint, body, and equipment body shop arena. Rupes works very closely with any number of paint manufacturers in Europe, and because of those relationships, it really has a leg up on most competition when it comes to understanding how to work on painted surfaces and how to prepare the surface pre-paint. So all those bits of knowledge that have been gained over the years have really helped Rupes elevate itself as far as a unique manufacturer of polishing and compounding equipment.
Wow, interesting.
My personal involvement with Rupes began in the mid-90s when I was actually managing director of a USA company with a base in Luxembourg. That particular company was also a manufacturer of portable tools, primarily for abrasive use and mostly pneumatic in nature. So while Rupes was sort of a competitor, they were sort of not also. But I came to know a number of the people involved in the Rupes organization, first-class operation all the way. And when I returned to the USA, I kept in touch with some of the people there. So a couple of years ago, Rupes decided to enter the USA market. They gave me a call and asked if I'd be interested in helping them manage an entry into the USA. So I kind of signed up with them out of a semi-retired stage, and having a ball working with some old friends with a really exciting product line, and structuring a marketing, a sales, logistic plan for them here in North America.
So what year did they decide to kind of break into the U.S. market, or North America, I guess you would say?
Rupes, some 20 to 25 years ago, actually had a tertiary relationship with a few distribution points here in the USA, but it never really involved a full commitment, and frankly, kind of disappeared. Okay. So it really came back to the forefront just about 2 years ago this next week with their first appearance at a SEMA show. Okay. And since then, the growth here has been phenomenal. The interest level that has been generated by the Bigfoot product line has just been incredible.
Wow. And Todd, let's kick it on over to you.
Sure. Where to start?
At the beginning.
At the beginning. Well, that would start with my parents. But basically, I was born and raised in Chicago, started detailing. My background is a detailer. And I started detailing originally for a friend's car dealership, family owned, and we had no clue what we were doing. I think I was 18, and it was use the pink stuff until the paint looked kind of shiny and you could see the reflection of your eyes in the glass, in the paint. Went to college in Central Florida, where I'm still at today, and detailed on the side when I was in college just to make extra money. Trying to make a long story short, met Mike Phillips, who now works for AutoGeek, and did one of his McGuire's training classes, and used my marketing background to start penetrating the exotic car market. It was one of those things where I kind of lucked into a few car collectors, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't blow what was a really big opportunity. So I did a lot of research and started associating with a lot of the more well-known and knowledgeable detailers. I think when we had spoken earlier, we kind of know a lot of the same faces.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people in this industry, and they've all been very helpful. I met a gentleman named Kevin Brown, who is one of our distributors, and Kevin completely changed the way that I saw paint polishing. And we would have these hour-long discussions on random orbital polishers and the advantages of a random orbital, and how could we create the best random orbital. And one thing we always came up with was stroke length, the size of the orbit or the throw. As I branched off for detailing, I went to work for a company called Proper Auto Care, who was one of the original online retailers of detailing. And then they went out of business about 3.5 years ago. And I went to work for AutoGeek, or Palm Beach Motoring Group. And I actually worked for a division of Palm Beach Motoring Group called Autopia. And that's when I first was introduced to the Rupes system, was because of Kevin Brown at SEMA. Rupes had a very small booth there, and Kevin kind of invited me over, and we went and checked it out, and we thought, man, all of our thoughts have kind of been answered. Finally, a large stroke, well-balanced random orbital polisher. I worked for AutoGeek, for Palm Beach Motoring Group, for another 2.5 years, and then I kind of wanted to try something new. And so I came to work for Rupes as their technical sales manager for North America about 3.5 months ago, I think. I don't know. Time's been kind of flying. It's been crazy. But that's a quick background. I could go into more detail, but I don't think the internet has enough data. We'd fill up a couple servers.
You know what's this is obviously the first time that I've been kind of hearing the background on you two guys and then the company itself, and I'm just sitting here thinking about it, taking notes, and I'm thinking, okay, well, Chip's talking about how Rupes is, their connections with paint manufacturers and that kind of niche, and then you come in, Todd, with the detailing background, and I'm just thinking it's like this perfect concoction of to birth like the perfect polisher.
I think it's a good concoction to introduce the perfect polisher to the right people. Okay. The polisher I can take no credit for. That existed before I did in this industry, but the machine and the system really, really is game changing. And given that my background for the previous 3 or 4 years prior to coming to work here was specifically DA polishing or random orbital polishing, it was a perfect marriage for me. And then also gives me a great opportunity to expand my horizons within this industry. It is really exciting, and we really do have a better mousetrap. And most people that have used it would agree, So if anything, I kind of lucked into this.
Yeah, but you were able to, recognize what a great machine and the ability that it had, and that's cool that they were willing to take you in with all that expertise and knowledge that you already had too. Chip, were you at that first SEMA show?
I was not, Jimbo. Actually, I was working independently with another company at that point. And I think Rupes actually was in a booth sharing type situation and had, as I remember, and Todd would probably verify this, just the LHR 21 Bigfoot product there at that point in time. Now, last year at SEMA, we had a much larger booth. Physical presence of our own, and an entire product line to show the public. I think this year we've doubled the size of our booth. We'll have some very exciting new product on hand for everyone to witness. And I think it's really important that we think about the Bigfoot as an entire system rather than just a polisher.
Okay.
That's certainly the game-changing status of it, as Todd indicated, is the fact that it is a series of tools, all of which have long throws or orbits. But it's also the engineering that went into the consumable products, the foams and the compounds, that really set the Bigfoot system aside from other approaches. The foams, for instance, that traditionally have been in the marketplace are generally not able to stand up to those long throws. And from what the engineering folks at Rupes tell me, the tool was a heck of a lot easier to ultimately engineer than the foams. That was the place where the time introduction hang-up was. So when you look at the Bigfoot, think of it in terms of an entire system rather than a series of singular tools.
Okay, so can we go through, for someone who's maybe not familiar, which I'm sure they're the minority, but if there's anyone listening that's not familiar with the product line or the system that you guys offer, can one of you guys kind of walk us through the products that you guys have?
Yeah. If I can kind of take it back a step and then go through it, that would be great. Yeah. The thing is polishing paint, right? Which is how a lot of detailers really make their living, is their ability to remove, paint imperfections and to increase the shine of the paint. Until recently, it's kind of been a black art. It's use this with this pad on this day of this temperature on this paint, and that's because detailing is so dynamic. And then traditionally, the style of machine that has been used is a rotary or a direct drive, a high-speed variable. There's a lot of different names for it. But basically, it's a machine that just spins. It's a right-angle grinder that we've adopted. And it's how I cut my teeth. My son will go to college because I know how to use a rotary polisher, and I was able to I would never say master. I would never be so bold as to say I mastered it. But I'm good enough with a rotary to create a perfect finish, a visually perfect finish. And it used to be that when we used rotary polishers, we used to look down on people who used orbitals because it didn't require the level of skill and training and expertise. About 5 or 6 years ago, I was part of the pre-beta testing of the Meguiar's DA microfiber system. I want to say it was about 5 years ago. And that was their microfiber discs and some of their products. And that was a huge learning experience for me because I got to work with some of their chemists and learn really how a DA works. And that and conversations I've had completely changed my view, on polishing. So going into the Bigfoot system, you kind of have to understand what makes them so effective is the stroke or the throw, because it allows the machine to move further in a given time, creates more friction, but it retains all of the benefits of a traditional orbital polisher. So orbital polishers compared to a rotary, they run cooler. They're less likely to inflict swirl marks. It's almost impossible to actually create a visual swirl mark pattern because a DA or a random orbital is moving the pad across the paint in a completely random motion. It combines the oscillation and a pad rotation. So one of the big advantages of the Bigfoot is that it is an orbital polisher that retains most, or four orbital polishers that retain most of the cutting ability or the aggressiveness as of a rotary. Does that make sense? Am I kind of going off the deep end here?
No. It totally makes sense. Make the connection between the throw and the cutting ability.
Okay, sure. So basically, the best way to describe a throw, because sometimes when people try to visualize an orbit, it's a very simple thing, but we get really confused. Orbit is circular. It's not elliptical. A lot of people think it's an oval. It's a perfect circle. It's similar to the way the Earth orbits around the sun, or the moon orbits around the Earth. So there's an orbital motion. That pad is actually orbiting around a central point. The distance from the central point to the center of the pad is divided by 2. It would be the total distance, because on the left side it's going to be half as far, and on the right side it's half as far. Right. That's your stroke length. That's how far is this pad traveling per orbit. The longer we move the pad in a given motion, so example 1 RPM, if the orbit is small, let's say it's an inch, that pad's going to move a very small amount, 1 inch per second times 3.14 times pi, so 3.14 inches. If we increase the length, the distance from the center of the pad to the center of the machine, we're increasing the throw, the stroke, the orbit. They're all kind of synonymous terms. What happens is now we're moving that pad much, much further. So if it's a 3-inch throw, just for example, now we're moving the pad almost 10 inches per rotation, per orbit. So you're generating a lot more friction. Polishing strength or cut is primarily a function of friction. The more friction we can impart on the paint surface, the more cutting ability we have. The faster we can remove imperfections from a surface. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the more throw you have, the more friction you create, which makes
in a given time frame.
Time frame, which makes defect removal faster.
Correct. On a rotary polisher, what we would do is go to a more aggressive pad. You might kick the speed up, which spins the outer edge of that pad proportionately faster, and then that's how you get cutting action on a rotary. With a random orbital, yeah, we do control the speed of the orbit, but the primary difference is the length of the throw. So we have the Rupes LHR 21ES, which is a 21 millimeter throw, which is considerable. It's, in very rough terms, about 3/4 of an inch, whereas a traditional random orbital polisher is going to be 5/16 of an inch. So we have a huge increase in the stroke length. And by keeping the number of oscillations or orbits per minute similar, we're able to move that pad 2 or 3 times faster. So we have 3 times the friction of a traditional random orbital polisher with all the benefits, the safety benefits, but we're able to correct paint 3 times quicker. Then we also have the LHR 15ES, which is designed to use a smaller pad. The 21 uses a 7-inch or 180 millimeter pad face. The 15 uses a 6-inch or 150 millimeter pad face. Mm-hmm. And that one spins a little faster because we're taking away some of that orbit length. We had to increase the RPM potential of the machine. So you get about roughly the same amount of correction, but you can fit it into tighter areas. It works a little bit better on curved body panels. Okay. Then there are 2 of the polishers which feature what I call like a random orbital chassis. It's a traditional chassis. It's an on-off thumb switch with a speed dial and the tail. Mm-hmm. And that's the LHR 12, which is called the Duetto. And then also the LHR 75E, which is called the Mini. And the big difference between those is the Duetto, they're both 12 millimeter throws, but the Duetto uses the same 6-inch, 150 millimeter pad as the 15, and the Mini is designed for tight spots, A-pillars, bumpers, and it uses a 4-inch or 100 millimeter pad face. So there's 4 ranges of polishers. The 15 and the 21 are kind of the top dog. They have very equal amounts of correction, and they're ideal for large surfaces. The Mini excels in tight and small areas, and the Duetto is really designed for somebody who's coming, maybe an at-home detailer, somebody who's coming from using another style of random orbital polisher. It's the same kind of feel, but the performance is pushed up because the stroke length is roughly 50% larger. Okay. So that kind of covers the polishers. My personal favorite's the 15. I think that's the most versatile. It has 95% the correction ability as the 21, but it allows you to get into tight areas and it opens up more of the vehicle to be polished. In addition to that, we also have 4 compounds and 4 pads, and each is color coordinated. And we kind of keep it simple. That there are official names for the compounds, there are official names for the pads, but we really kind of just keep them color coordinated. So the most aggressive is the blue compound with the blue pad, and then second most going down the level in aggressiveness, it would go blue, green, yellow, white, each with a corresponding pad. I think that kind of covers. We also offer a couple pneumatic tools, backing plates, aprons, etc. But the primary focus is really on our polishers, the pads, and the polishing compounds.
I love how it's color coordinated because it makes it so easy. I know out of everything that you just said, and you went super deep, and I really loved it. But just off the top of my head, the pads and the compound, just keeping it so easy with the blue goes with blue, the yellow goes with yellow. I mean, when your mind's already racing as a detailer to try and come up with a game plan of how you're going to polish the car or how you're going to detail the car, the last thing you want to have to remember is what compound goes with what pad without marking it, you know.
Of course. The idea, it's kind of keep it simple, Simon. As a detailer, I was probably one of the worst. What I did was I took a system that was engineered and I totally scrambled it. I would start using this with that and, use this pad with this thing. And I really thought I was doing something special. But there's so much engineering in the Bigfoot system that there really, at least in my experience, there's no need to go outside the system. I can give you an example. The blue pad, for example, that's our coarsest pad. The blue foam pad, there's also a blue microfiber, is a very open-celled, very porous pad, right? So if you use a real thin compound on it, it'll splatter everywhere, but it'll also suck up into the pad because it's a very spongy pad. It's open cell. There's a lot of air in that pad. So the compound, our blue compound, is designed to work with that pad. It's a very thick gel. So it sets on the surface of the pad or the face of the pad, and it doesn't saturate into the pad. And this is very important when we're talking about a random orbital polisher, because it's moving off axis. It's an orbital motion, kind of like a scrambler at the fair, the scrambler ride. If we change the weight of that pad, the machine's going to come completely unbalanced. It's throwing this huge weight over your head. Imagine you tie a rock to a string and twirl it over your head.
Right.
The heavier you make that rock, the more force is going to be exerted on your arm. It's kind of the same concept. In order to make a large throw random orbital polisher work, and the reason why almost everybody else sticks to a 5/16 throw or a 3/16 throw is because the bigger we make that orbit, the more important balance becomes. Otherwise, the machine's going to throw you around and it's going to vibrate. The pads are weighted to the counter weight inside each mechanism. That's why the 21 works with a 7-inch pad. The 15 and the Duetto work with a 6-inch pad, and the Mini works with a 4-inch pad, because there's a counterweight that's going to keep the machine balanced. If we use the wrong compound or the wrong pad, it throws the balance off. So the blue compound is designed not to saturate. So another benefit we have is really 3 small little drops on a 7-inch pad is all you need to work roughly a 4 square foot section. Because none of that compound is absorbing into the pad, which would throw off the weight, but it'd also just be wasted material. And this is the level of engineering you'll find throughout the compounds and polishes. The white pad, which is our finest, is a very, very fine, high PPI, high pores per inch count pad. It's not nearly as porous, so the compound, or the polish in this case, doesn't need to be as thick. It needs to be a little thinner so it spreads over the face. So literally from the ground up, the Bigfoot system is a system. It literally every part has been engineered to work with themselves. Kind of Chip touched on a little earlier. The traditional Velcro on a different pad is going to have a hard time not getting thrown off the backing plate,
right,
because of the force of the orbit. So even the Velcro or the hook and loop on the back of our pads is a little bit longer, and it's matched to the hook and loop on the backing pad, so you get a real solid connection. Again, this is important. So everything, when we put all this throw into the machine, there's a lot of stress, and so everything has to be engineered backwards to withstand the stress. And more importantly, it's balanced. If you've ever used any of the other more traditional random orbital polishers, they give you carpal tunnel. They put your hands to sleep in a few minutes. Whereas a Bigfoot you could use with one hand, and it's barely going to vibrate. I mean, it's almost rotary smooth.
I'm glad you brought that up about the whole system. And I think that made me think of something that I don't really think about that often, and I'm sure a lot of detailers that are in the same boat, they really don't think about it. They think that pads and products are interchangeable regardless of the machine that you're using. But it makes sense if you think about it. That pad was specifically engineered to work with that machine and that product. And as detailers, if we're looking for the ultimate finish or the ultimate process, and we want to make it as smooth and as easy as possible, we need to make sure that we're using the products and the pads that were designed to work with the machine. Now, with that said, how much of a difference in finish are guys going to be achieving if they don't use the right pad and the right compound?
Talk about putting me on the spot.
Or is it just going to make their life a little bit more difficult?
Here's the thing. At the end of the day, I'm trying to think how I can give you a roundabout answer and not make it too roundabout so I get called out.
And we're not about putting anyone on blast. So
no, I'm not putting anybody on blast.
No, and I didn't think you were.
There are detailing can be if we're talking about the detailing aspect, the high-end detailers versus, let's say, a body shop. High-end detailers can be very picky about what they use. And this is me coming from that background.
Yeah.
Our machines, in my opinion, are by far the best orbital polishers on the market. So they could, if they're used to using orbital polishers and they want to use, anybody wants to use their favorite pad and their favorite polish, they should get better results with our machine. Does that make sense?
Right.
The machine is a better mousetrap, the machine itself, the tool.
Okay.
That said, the system is so well engineered that I don't see the point of going outside of it. But again, detailers, we are a funny bunch. Hey, I use this on this paint, and this is what works best for me, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Okay, in that case, you can do it. The problem you're going to run into is it's going to vibrate more. You could have some problems with the Velcro interface. And more importantly, we really can't, as a company, help you troubleshoot the issue because we've developed it as a system. Does that make sense?
Totally. So it may not be that the finish of the car is that much different than using the system, but for the detailer using it, if they're going outside the system, it may make their life a little bit more difficult, whereas if they just use the system how it was designed to work, it wouldn't be as difficult. And your example with maybe higher vibrations, or maybe the paint isn't polishing out as quickly as it could be, or something like that. Is that
correct?
Okay.
Yeah. I would never tell somebody not to use what they don't like. I mean, that's and I would never be so bold as to do that. The system itself, our compounds and polishers.
Todd, we lost you a little bit. There you go.
Okay, no problem. I would never be so bold as to tell somebody not to use something they like. And there are guys out there that use different polishes and different pads and are getting phenomenal results. And I think that's great. I mean, that's, if anything, it just shows the power of the tool. But I can remove on fresh paint 1,500 grit scratches from most fresh paints, unless it's an exceptionally hard clear coat that dries very fast. I can remove 1,500 grit scratches pretty quickly with our blue foam and our blue compound. That's a lot of cutting power, and I can leave a finish that's good enough on light colored cars that you're not going to see any visual scratch pattern. So it really is kind of a one-step system, at least on a light-colored car. If you're doing high-end detailing, you're always going to want to finish it with something finer anyways. But so I don't see the point, looking at it logically, to go to something else. If I can remove 1,500 grit scratches and leave a finish that is either acceptable, depending on the industry, or I can leave a finish that requires an additional very light follow-up step, it seems like all the guesswork has kind of been taken out of it. So, again, coming from a detailing background, what we used to do is we used to take systems and rip them apart and think we knew better. The first time, and I was still a detailer when I used the Bigfoot system, the first time I used the Bigfoot system, it was probably the first time I didn't try to re-engineer an engineered system. It just worked too well. And it does. It's exceptional. There's guys out in Europe that are some of the best detailers in the world, and these guys are using nothing but the Rupes system, and they're winning crazy car shows. And the last car that I detailed that went to Pebble Beach, that won Best in Paint in class, was final polished using the Rupes white combination. So it's certainly as capable as any other product out there, the compounds and polishes, but they work even better when used on our polishers.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of trying just a crazy amount of different stuff and mixing stuff, and I think we're all like that.
Well, you're a detailer. It's in your blood.
But if you actually stop and kind of take your ego out of it a little bit, and you think about how much time, how much money, how much energy, how much testing has gone into systems like you're talking about, it's like, why am I going to mess with the system? Like they've put way more money, way more time into developing this whole thing. Why am I going to mess with it? You know?
I think, too, from a mechanical standpoint, when we talk about vibration levels, they certainly do affect the finish that you impart to any surface. But when you have excessive vibration, you are also going to compromise the performance of the tool. All the tools that are random orbital have a front-end bearing system that is extremely susceptible because of that large throw. So what you want to do certainly is to limit your vibration, and that will extend your bearing life. So when we talk about vibration, it's not just, as Todd suggested, feeling the carpal tunnel situation. It's also for the protection of the mechanical performance of the tool itself. You're going to have much more extended life with a tool that runs at low vibration levels.
And how does the vibration level affect the finish that you're seeing on the paint? Is the machine and the pad, if it's a high vibration, is the machine kind of bouncing? Is it a little more bouncy?
Yeah, one of the techniques that we always recommend with the Bigfoot is to keep the pad as flat to the surface as possible. When vibration is present, excessive vibration especially, you will see the pad actually lift off the surface at some points. So keeping the integrity of the system in place will ensure that you do have the lowest vibration levels. And as Todd suggested, heavens, there's no way that we could test every foam, every microfiber, every compound known to man. We just can't do that. But we do know that the way the system has been engineered delivers tremendous results with low vibration and great performance. So staying at home with that system is something that we do recommend.
Okay. Todd, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
The only thing I could add is yes, vibration is absolutely going to sacrifice surface quality. Whenever we polish paint, we're really talking about making the paint as level as possible, minimizing the distance between the low spot and the high spot, or hopefully eliminating the difference. And anytime you have vibration, that pad, or if, let's say you're using an orbital to sand, it doesn't really matter. It's all conceptually the same. You're creating areas of pressure on the pad where it's going to dig in, where the abrasive is going to be more aggressive. You're also creating an equal amount of, I guess, negative pressure, or where the pad is bunching up and lifting and you're getting pockets. So now you've got some abrasives that are used, some abrasives that are unused, and it increases the likelihood of scouring the finish. Even on the final polishing step, when you are done and the paint looks visually perfect to your eyes, the paint's not perfect. You cannot polish paint and make it perfect. It's a misnomer. If you have a strong enough microscope, you're going to see scratches from the abrasives. You're taking abrasives and rubbing them across paint. It's just a matter of how far you zoom in. So even when it comes to final polishing, you want to create as level of a surface microscopically at this point as possible. So if the machine's vibrating, the pad is bunching up, you're creating microscopically deeper scratches. You may not see them; they may not present as swirl marks when you look at it in the bright sun on a black paint. The paint might look perfect to our capability, to our ability to see it, but it's not perfect. So yes, vibration, even on the final polishing step, can reduce the gloss. You'd probably need a gloss meter. It may even be immeasurable for all intents and purposes, but there is a difference. To get the highest quality finish, you want the surface as level as humanly possible.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I want to I'm just thinking about the pads right now, and specifically the microfiber pads. Okay. I'm interested in the design of them. So how, what is behind, or what's the reasoning behind having more of an open pad, I guess I would call it, or more, I guess you guys can tell me the technical term that you call it, but basically instead of having a closed pad or no openings on the surface of the pad, your guys' microfiber pads do. What is that, to reduce heat, or what is that?
You're talking about the slotted design in the pad.
Slotted, there we go. No good words was coming to my brain.
Yeah, that one just kind of popped in there, but you're more than welcome to use it.
Thank you.
There are, with anything, there's always a compromise. Microfiber pads get their cutting ability by the surface area that they have, right? So if you think of a head of human hair, all that microfiber, if you can put the polishing liquid on that and it can completely cover the microfiber, you have a huge amount of surface area that's loaded with abrasive material. So you get more cut. Mm-hmm. So there is a compromise. You're obviously removing some surface material when you put the slotted design in, but also there's benefits to it. The primary benefit really is weight. Again, we go back to weight. If we don't have the weight of that microfiber pad correct, you're going to feel it when you turn the machine on. The slotted design does help channel air off of the surface. Again, we have more surface area, more abrasive. So even though it's an orbital polisher, if you're polishing a composite body panel, something that retains heat, you can get it pretty warm even with an orbital. So there is definitely a heat factor. It's going to help, aerate the surface, or at least provide a pathway for the heat to escape. And also remember, it's easy to use a full-faced microfiber pad if you're only orbiting 5/16 of an inch. But when you're orbiting 21 millimeters, that is an incredible amount of friction or grip on the surface. So trying to orbit a full-faced 7-inch or 6-inch microfiber disc, 21 millimeters, it's almost going to cause like a drag, like a frictional drag, which could lead to increased vibration and reduce the pad rotation, how fast it spins. So there's a couple different reasons why they went to the slotted design. I would say those are probably the three major ones, is the weight, the heat, and also just because we found that in testing, the slotted design performed better on a larger throw machine.
There's one really important design feature, Jimbo, about the microfiber pads from Rupes, and that is that the microfibers, the individual fibers, are actually molded into the substrate of the foam. In traditional microfiber pads, there is a mechanical attachment, generally a glue, an adhesive, something of that nature.
Right.
And you'll find many times that there's a delamination problem on the front end of the pad, where the microfiber will actually tear away from the substrate. Well, with the fibers actually molded into the substrate in the Rupes approach, that's impossible to do. The second thing that eliminates is the glue squeeze that you'll often find at the edge of the pad. Since there is no glue, there's no glue squeeze, and that eliminates that aggressive leading edge that sometimes can defile the painted surface itself. So a couple of really important issues there as far as the design of that microfiber pad.
And it kind of, to me, what I was kind of just thinking about right now about, you saying that the fibers are actually woven into the base of the pad, I guess. I mean, that
they're
is
actually molded.
Molded in, almost like impregnated.
Okay.
Yeah, they're actually molded in.
Molded in, but the level of detail we're talking about in just a pad is unbelievable. That is amazing.
Yeah, I've knocked around the power tool business for a few years now, and always the most challenging engineering problems come from the backing pads. Tools are pretty easy to make, but the backing pads are really tough. So I was I was really impressed with the engineering expertise that I saw from these particular microfibers. That's a pretty strong leap forward from a technological and engineering standpoint.
Yeah, and it just seems like, if a company's willing to go to that extent when we're just talking about pads, what is their machine like? That's what it makes me think about. So how has the let's see if I can get the tongue roll, Rupes.
Perfect.
How was that? Good?
That was excellent.
How has the machine itself, how has the Bigfoot system, how has that changed, and how is it continuing to change the detailing industry?
Chip, you want to answer that one, or you want me to take it, bud?
With your background, Todd, I think you're probably better suited to do that.
Okay. Orbital polishing in and of itself has changed detailing for the better. In my opinion, the one thing that we're seeing is really just a higher quality finish. Don't get me wrong, there's always been the top tier guys, the guys that could create a great finish because they had years and years and years of experience and knowledge and let's face it, using a rotary at the highest level is really an art form. It's not necessarily a process.
Definitely.
At least that would be my opinion. And maybe I'm tooting my own horn a little bit. Whereas the Bigfoot system allows just about anybody, and I truly mean this, just about anybody with 10 to 15 minutes of instruction to produce identical results.
Wow.
So it has made it possible for everybody, from the at-home user to the body shop professional, and frankly, in body shops, you see a lot of subpar polishing. They're not paid to polish; they're paid to paint.
Right.
So it's get it in and get it out. So from the beginning user to the body shop professional to the detailer to the guy that owns a detail shop where he's got 8 guys working for him, it has made polishing easier. It's made it more accessible to basically everybody. In many circumstances, because we are putting the scratches of polishing in a random, completely dispersed pattern, it allows us to eliminate a step or 2 of polishing. So there are time savings, which is another huge advantage. It eliminates the risk of burning an edge or overheating the paint. So again, it takes us back to the beginner is safe to use it. So there's just a lot of advantages when it comes to polishing or correcting or refinishing paint, because we're able to offer professional level results or better than professional level results for anybody in less time. So if you look at the 3 major the categories of polishing or benefits, time savings, we've got that one. Ease of use and safety, absolutely ace that one. And corrective ability, finish quality, we're on point there. We're as good or better than everything. So it really is an inclusive system. It's made it, to summarize my long-winded answer, it's just made it easier for everybody to get better results.
I agree, and I think that is something that's so cool about what it's done for the industry is that, I think there will always be those kind of hack job detailers, but with machines like this one and products that are really starting to develop with technology, it's making kind of those detailers that just go out and do the hack jobs, it's making that the percentage of them less and less, because the barrier to entry to, like you said, to producing just a phenomenal finish is getting easier and easier, for anyone to be able to pick it up. It's not that black hole anymore, like you mentioned earlier.
Well, prior to Bigfoot, you had Orbital. We're not the first random orbital polisher, but by any stretch. And there were guys that were using them. The problem is the guy at home in his garage with his Corvette, it would take him 3 days.
Right.
Or the professional who used it would take him 2 days. So the ability to not only make the entry into it easier, but to almost, you know, eliminate the time penalty of using a random orbital polisher has been, you know, equally as important. It really is, you know, I know I've said it a couple times, but it's a better mousetrap. It just works better, and it makes it possible for everybody to get exceptional results. I've had my 10-year-old son polish my car. He's 10 years old. You know,
child labor. You can't do that.
No, you know, I bribed him with a bag of candy. He thought he won the lottery.
What a deal.
And, yeah, exactly. And you know what's worse? I had him do my girlfriend's car too. Like, I don't know if I should admit this on anything that can be recorded, but you know, it's true. And you know, 10 years old, and he's turning out a finish better than what I've seen out of certain detail shops.
Wow.
So, and it took him a couple hours. It wasn't an all day process. And even touching on, kind of jumping back a little bit, I'm sorry, I do apologize for being long-winded. Even our compounds are easy to wipe off. And because it's a random orbital versus a high pad edge speed of a rotary, we're not slinging compound and polish into impossible to reach areas. So when he was done polishing, all he had to do was wipe the residue off the paint. You know, we weren't chasing it out of every door jam and you know, lifting up the hood and trying to get a toothpick because the stuff had dried. You know, I mean, it's all the stuff wipes off. The mess is pretty much eliminated. You know, it never hurts to wash a car after you're done polishing it. Mm-hmm. But if speed is the name of the game, there's definitely no need to when you use our polishing liquids.
There's nothing worse than using a polish or a compound that just sprays everywhere. I got a quick story. So I was working on a 2013 Chevy Camaro, and I no problem, thought I got it handled. It was just going to be a quick one-step polish out. I didn't know that the paint on those was so hard. So I was trying a few different things, and the guy I was doing it for was he was a weekend warrior, and he got sucked into every single marketing trick in the book and had just gobs and gobs and gobs of product, of polishers, and it was insane. And he was like, oh, do you want to try a different polish, see if you can get a different machine and a different polish to see if you can get a better result. And the car was all clean, wiped down everything. It just was, it wasn't as good as I wanted it nor he wanted it. So I was like, sure, he's like, oh man, this product apparently is the best. And we put it on a machine and did it. Sprayed all over the front windshield, all over the windshield wipers, onto the roof. I was so bummed. So that is actually a huge point that you bring up. If there's no spray, it's a huge time saver. Time saver.
We see that a lot in the professional, in the paint shops, where in paint shop, they typically sand if they have dirt in the paint. So it might be a spot here, a spot there, and then they have to polish it out. Right. The traditional system is they sand it, and then they buff it with 3 steps. And you know, these are guys using rotaries who do not have maybe the highest technical skill with a rotary polisher, and you get splatter. So what happened, I actually happened to be in a paint body shop, and the customer had come in. They had just picked up their car, and they complained about a dust nib, a little spot of dirt that creates a bump in the finish. Mm-hmm. And the guy kind of, oh no, here, you know, now I got to go wash the car again. And I just went out there, sanded it with 2000 grit, grabbed our mini and our green, which is our green compound green polish, polished it out, didn't create a mess, wiped it off, and the customer left within minutes. And they were expecting this to be an hour-long procedure. So there is a huge advantage of not creating a mess. And in the type of detailing I used to do, we would polish the car for 5 or 6 or 7 steps, sometimes, if required. And then the whole car would need to be pressure washed, and every door jamb we'd be in there. We used to take microfibers and wrap them around credit cards to clean, you know, with soapy water. And it took 2 or 3 hours of post cleanup, just to make sure that you're delivering a vehicle that looks like it's never been polished. There's just no trace of, and you're taping up all the jams and the trim, and this allows you to bypass it pretty much. The other thing, and I do jump around a lot, as things enter my brain.
It's okay. I'm the same way.
Poor Chip has to deal with me, if you could imagine. He's so calculated and so well spoken, and then there's me, and
and one step below you is me over here, like, okay, I think I follow. Sure, all right.
It's as if you're as random as I am, then you totally are like, yeah, I get it. It's like that makes sense.
I love it.
But talking about finish quality, random orbital polishers have a huge advantage over rotary polishers. A rotary is taking an abrasive and spinning it in a linear motion, right? It's somewhat linear. It's almost like straight line scratches with whatever the curvature of the edge of the pad is. If you think about sanding, if you sand in a straight line, if you're hand sanding, you always see the scratch pattern. Even if it's 3000 grit,
right,
you rub it and you see the 3000 grit. It's kind of similar. Our eyes see in patterns. So when you use a rotary polisher, and we used to do everything, I would say, correctly. We'll wipe the paint down with a solvent or a degreaser after every step and inspect it in lights and do this and do that and go to a finer polish and clean the pad halfway through and keep going. I mean, halfway through the polishing section, not the car. We'd switch to 8 fresh pads through a car. And the car would be visually perfect. And we'd wipe it with alcohol and we'd pull it out in the sun and it would be perfect to our eyes, of course. But then 3 or 4 months later, you look at it, and if you catch it in the right light, just the right light, you could see the very little whisper of we call them like a hologram or a scratch. And this is the nature of the machine. This is because you're taking abrasive material and rubbing it across the paint in a repeating pattern, right? Whereas with a random orbital polisher, the rotation, the orbit speed is fairly fixed, but the actual rotation of the pad is constantly changing. So you really are creating a completely dispersed random scratch pattern. So going back to my sanding example, think about the hand sanding, 3000 grit, you see the marks. But if you put 3000 grit on a DA or a orbital sander and sand, you don't see any scratch marks. It just looks like a semi-gloss or a satin finish because our eyes cannot visually pick up the dispersed scratch pattern. And actually, that scratch pattern is more level. You don't have a big variance between the lows and highs of the surface.
Right.
So the same thing occurs with random orbital polishing. The fact that we are introducing super microscopic scratches into the surface, ones you'll never see with your eyes, but we're doing it in a way that will never appear to you visually. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah, it's like DA sanding versus hand sanding kind of thing. Same thing with rotary versus orbital polishing. Mm-hmm. You create a better quality finish just by the nature of the machine. Just by the very nature of the machine. It has nothing to do with skill level. Right. It's the, I can't really think of a good analogy, but if you want me to make you a steak dinner and all you give me is chicken, I can't make a steak dinner. I can just make really good chicken, right? Right. Same thing with the Bigfoot style polisher. You have the ability to truly create a hologram-free, swirl-free finish that's you're not gonna see traces of your polishing marks 3 months down the road or 5 months down the road. The surface that you're left with is the surface that you've created. We also, because it's a random orbital, you don't need as much mineral oil in the polishes, so you're not getting that filling effect that you get with a lot of rotary polishers or polishes, which is often not even really by design. It's just a byproduct of making a liquid polish that has to withstand the friction and the speed and the heat of a rotary. So by eliminating that problem, we can work towards a more permanent solution.
Chip, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that covers it pretty well. At the end of the day, of course, what all we are looking for is to create a scratch pattern that the eye cannot perceive. And when we polish or sand with a rotary motion, your eye will perceive that. When you polish or sand with a gear-driven defined orbital motion, your eye will perceive that. When you sand or polish with a true random orbital motion, the cross-hatching of the scratches actually they cover themselves. So, as Todd said, there's no pattern, so your eye can't perceive it. And that primarily is the difference among the rotary, gear-driven, and random orbital approaches. There's no question that the random orbital motion leaves a scratch pattern that is far less likely to be perceived by the human eye.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I'm so excited about this product. But so I think we covered the machine, the pads, and the compound pretty well. Let's talk about something really fun. This show is gonna go live November 3rd. It's SEMA week. Are you guys both at SEMA?
Yes, we'll both be there.
So let's talk about SEMA. Let's talk about, are you guys going to be releasing new products? What do you want people to come see?
I'll let Chip handle that because I have a large and big mouth.
All good.
I mean, physically large, but there's a lot of stuff that spews out of it as well. So.
And there will be some new products at SEMA, both durable and consumable. I think the one product that excites me the most is what we are calling our UHS, or ultra hard surface system, and that has been designed primarily to be compatible with some of the extremely hard clear coats that several German auto manufacturers are currently using in their manufacturing process. The Rupes engineering team has come up with a new compound and a new foam that works extremely well on those very, very hard clear coats that are very, very hard to correct. We've also done a little bit of playing about with what we call the UHS on some general detailing applications, and have found it to be a terrific product. So we know it works extremely well with the very hard clear coats, and we are really optimistic that it's going to create some real opportunities to both reduce time and increase finish capability in some general detailing applications as well.
Wow. Todd, anything you want to add to that?
I don't know what I'm allowed to add to that. I would basically summarize what Chip just said. The new UHS Easy Gloss compound and pad is really, really exciting product. It's a very exciting product for me to use because it really takes the concept of one-step detailing, like what you had to deal with on that hard Camaro, a step further. When we talk about one-step detailing, by nature, it's a compromise. Either you use something aggressive that gets out the deeper imperfections, but you're left with a haze, or depending on the machine you use, buffer trails or scratches, whatever. And then, or you go to a polish that is so fine that you leave a high gloss finish, but then you tend to only highlight all the imperfections that you couldn't remove,
right?
So there's always this built-in compromise with the UHS Easy Gloss system. It's gonna give you the cutting power that I would say is like near compound levels. I was doing some testing yesterday. I make no promises, but I was able to remove 3,000 grit scratches from very hard factory OEM baked paint and leave a 100% swirl-free finish in one step.
Whoa.
And again, that's because we're working with a lot of advantages. If you're using a rotary, the idea of a one-step is kind of out the window because you have to use something fine enough not to give you a hologram effect. So you're usually just doing it with a finishing polish and hoping to get some correction, you know?
Mm-hmm.
With other systems, again, there's always been this compromise, but because we have the advantage, we're walking into it kind of with our guns loaded. We've got a large stroke random orbital, which is the ideal tool for this style of polishing, for one-step polishing, because it gives us the cut of a rotary with a dispersed scratch pattern. So we've already got an advantage. And now that we've the brilliant engineers at Rupes have come up with a pad that takes advantage of the dispersed scratch pattern and a compound that matches perfectly to this new foam, we're really able to extend what you can expect from a one-step in terms of cut and finish and time savings. The product breaks down extremely fast. It was engineered for polishing of scratch-resistant clear coats. They're very, ceramic clears, stuff of that nature. You do find them more and more on the U.S. As paint manufacturers are kind of global nowadays. But it really, not only is it ideal on scratch-resistant clear coats, but it really works exceptionally well on every paint system I've tested it on. Wow. Just absolutely pushes the limits of what a one-step product should be able to do. Wow. And again, it's part of this complete system mentality where the compound is great, the polish is great, the polishers are great, but because they're all engineered to work together, you get this synergistic effect where 1 + 1 + 1 is equaling 5 versus 3. Wow. So I'm really excited about that. I'm super excited to get the feedback when people get to play with this product.
It sounds, I mean, I need to start coming. I'm going to start reading the dictionary for different words because it sounds amazing. I keep saying that, but I think about a detailer that's maybe not doing super high end work, so he's not the low volume guy, but he's also not the high volume guy either. He's somewhere wedged in the middle, and it seems like this, the one step is like the ideal go-to for that detailer. And it sounds like this, you can have the best of both worlds, because I have run into exactly what you talked about. It's either, working on a black Ford Mustang, and it's like, well, the customer wants shiny, so I give them shiny, but I can see that there's still some spider webbing in the paint.
Of course.
But then if I were to, like you said, nor does he want to pay for full paint correction. So you're in this weird limbo spot of, what do you do? Because you're almost worried if another detailer sees your work that, they're going to point it out to the customer and that whole fiasco. But it sounds like this could be a potentially problem solver.
Well, you're so right. I can't even tell you how many sleepless nights I spent as a detailer because I was forced to compromise my work due to, let's say, the job I was paid to perform. And every time you buff, anytime you touch paint with a machine, you're basically buffing your signature into the car, right? I mean, that's what you did. And the truth doesn't lie. The only thing I would kind of slightly disagree with you with what you said was that, this seems to be a good compromise, somewhere in the middle. I think for a lot of guys, it's not going to be a compromise. I think it's just going to be the solution. Nice. Because the UHS, again, in my testing, is leaving a surface finish that is 100% acceptable on black paint. I mean, we're talking a swirl-free, high-gloss finish. So you're not really compromising the finish quality by using it. You're just extending the ability of that finishing polish to remove defects. Wow. So I think a lot of guys that are used to doing multiple step systems are going to be able to shrink that multiple step into one step. And if they're charging by the job versus by the hour, they should realize a greater profit margin with no, with no real drawback, with no compromise. I mean, it's kind of win-win. Of course, we'll see how it all plays out, but so far, it's really just been an exceptional system.
Is that product going to be available right after SEMA or even at SEMA for purchase?
Chip?
Yeah, I don't think, Jimbo, that we'll have it available at SEMA for purchase, but I anticipate that we will have a good stock level in the United States some point during the month of November.
It's not going to be like the iPhone release, right, where they release it and then you got to wait like 8 months to get it.
You know, I got mine first week, no. So I can't complain.
Nice. I just ordered mine.
No, we're in production on the product now. It's of course we're not next door to Milan, so it takes a little bit of time to load the boat up and sail it to New York and offload it and get the product out into the hands of our distribution base. But I fully expect by the time Thanksgiving rolls around, or the 1st of December, we should have a full stock of product here in the U.S.
Awesome. All right, guys. So let's wrap it up. If someone wants to buy some Rupes product, machine, or they want to connect with you, Chip, why don't you start? How can people get it? How can people do that?
We sell through a distribution network. The distributors for the U.S. are listed on the Rupes website at www.rupes.com. And certainly the internet search that it has become such a familiar part of our lives will also show most of the folks that do handle the Rupes product here in North America.
Cool. And Todd, how about you? People want to connect with you, or do you not want to be bothered?
Yeah, don't bother me. I have to deal with Chip. No, you know, the easiest way to get a hold of me is through my email address, which is my first initial and last name, which is THELME. So it's kind of like helmet, but you chop off the T at the end, put it at the front. THELME at rupes.com. Definitely the easiest way. Also, I'll throw out my cell phone number, which is also dangerous. If anybody ever has a technical problem that I could help them with, it's area code 407-963-1444. And anything I could do to help, it's definitely what I'm here for. So it's never a problem. Unless I start getting weird text messages, Jimbo, and then I'm going to blame you.
No promises or guarantees.
All right. Well,
any last words that you guys wanted to add before we end here?
I guess I'll just jump the gun and go first. Thank you very much for having us. You know, obviously I love to talk too much, so this was a perfect outlet for me to hear myself.
You should be a podcast host. You get to talk all the time.
You know, to be honest, I'm so happy with my job and the challenges of educating people and watching people get exceptional results, our customer base.
That's awesome.
That I don't think I have a future in podcast. Unless I talk too much and Chip gets rid of me, and then you'll definitely be getting a phone call.
Well, podcast, you may not see a future in podcast hosting, but you could be on podcast.
Okay, yeah, there you go. I could just visit different podcasts, but yours is the best from what I understand. So
that's what they tell me.
That's what I've heard. So I just want to say thank you very much for having me on, and it was really a pleasure.
You got it. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
I have never seen a group of people so emotionally invested in what they do as the high-end detailing segment. It's just been a pleasure to work with most of these folks and to be able to introduce a product to them that makes their lives a bit easier, their results a bit better, and adds, I think, a new dimension to their abilities. So just pass that along to your listeners, if you will. We sure appreciate them. We continue to do whatever we can to make the entire detailing world a more pleasant and fun place to be part of.
You know, I want to thank you guys both, not only for coming on the show, but thank you for the company that you guys work for exactly what you just talked about, making our lives easier. Detailing is a very, very physical industry, and anything that we can implement to kind of help our bodies to last longer is huge. So thank you both personally for coming on, and thanks to Rupes for making a great product.
Thank you very much.